If I put two headlines in front of you right now from the same city on the same morning, one would say, "Violent crime just hit a 20-year low." And the other would say, "A man was attacked outside a train station last night." We both know which one you're tapping. And you'd tap it in a good mood, 10 minutes after promising yourself you were done with the news for the day. Almost everyone who catches themselves doing this lands on the same explanation: that something is wrong with them, that they're addicted, that the phone finally broke their attention. Tonight's file is about why that explanation is wrong. And I don't mean wrong in a comforting way. The machinery pulling your thumb toward the bad headline is some of the oldest equipment you own. It was running long before phones existed, and by the end of this file, you'll know exactly what it's for. Because underneath all of this sits a question that sounds almost absurd out loud. Why would a brain whose entire job is keeping you alive make you feel this bad, on purpose, every single night? Whatever answer just formed in your head, the file is about to test it. Most people blame the phone, or the algorithm behind it, and honestly, that's a reasonable theory. The feed showed up right around the time everyone's attention fell apart, so it has motive and opportunity. And most people close the case right there. Except the timeline doesn't hold. Editors had a saying, "If it bleeds, it leads," a full century before the first smartphone. So this pull was already steering front pages when your great-grandparents were the audience. And it goes back further than print. Researchers have run studies with infants in the first year of life. Babies who have never seen a news broadcast, who have no idea what the news even is. Somewhere around 6 or 7 months old, they start locking their attention onto the fearful faces over the happy ones, and holding it there longer. Nobody taught them that, which means the algorithm didn't build the pull, it found it. And near the end of this file, the machines themselves are going to prove that, with numbers, in the part of this story almost nobody knows. So where did the pull come from? The story starts somewhere very old. An ancestor of yours is standing in tall grass when something rustles, and there are only two explanations. Either it's the wind, or it's a lion. The costs of guessing wrong are not the same in both directions. If she assumes wind and she's wrong, everything ends right there and you are never born. If she assumes lion and she's wrong, she loses a jolt of fear and a few embarrassing seconds of sprinting away from a breeze. An evolutionary psychiatrist named Randolph Nesse calls this the smoke detector principle. Your smoke alarm goes off for burnt toast, which is annoying, but you'd never trade it for one that stays quiet through toast, because that alarm might also stay quiet through a real fire. So the alarm is tuned to overfire, on purpose, because 1,000 false alarms cost you almost nothing, and one missed fire costs you everything. Evolution ran the same math on fear for a couple of million years and reached the same answer. And that tells you something slightly uncomfortable about your family tree. The calm ones, the ones who ignored the rustle, got edited out of the story. You are descended, every one of us is, from the ones who flinched. That tuning never left, and you can measure it in a lab today. Researchers at Ohio State wired people up and showed them images, some pleasant, some awful. And the electrical response to the negative ones spiked measurably harder. It happened fast, too, within a few hundred milliseconds, before anything you'd call a thought had even formed. The paper's title says it plainly: negative information weighs more heavily on the brain. Economists find the same lopsidedness with money, because losing 50 pounds stings about twice as hard as winning 50 feels good. There's a well-known psychology review titled, almost word for word, "Bad is stronger than good," and it keeps finding the pattern everywhere it looks. Criticism outweighs praise. A bad first impression sets like concrete. while a good one stays wet. You already know this from your own life. Because the last harsh thing somebody said about your work is something you can probably still quote word for word, while the last compliment is mostly gone. So the alarm is ancient, and it's lopsided, fine. But that still doesn't explain why it turns a grown adult into someone reading their 4th article about the same disaster at 1 in the morning. The explanation is what the alarm needs in order to switch off. Out in the world, an alarm resolves. The rustle turns out to be a lion, or it turns out to be the wind. And either way, within seconds, you know. The question closes and the body stands down. And then there's the thing in your hand. The feed is a threat signal with no ending built in, because every swipe is another rustle, and behind it another, and the grass never runs out. Your alarm keeps doing the only thing it knows, gathering information until the danger resolves. And the feed's entire job is to make sure it never does. There's no all clear coming. There's no last article, which means you're running a scan that cannot complete. That's what doomscrolling actually is. It isn't really entertainment, and it isn't quite habit either. It's an ancient safety check, stuck open. Now, here's the part I told you to wait for, because everything so far could still sound like a tidy theory that happens to flatter your excuse. So here's the moment it stopped being theory. There was a website called Upworthy in the early 2010s, at one point among the biggest viral publishers on the planet, and they had a practice most readers never knew about. For every story, they wrote a stack of different headlines, showed each version to a slice of the audience, and let the clicks decide. There was no theory of the mind anywhere in that building, just a running measurement of which words humans choose. Years later, that archive was handed to researchers. More than 22,000 of these little experiments, something like 100,000 different headlines, and nearly 6 million clicks to learn from. And when they ran the numbers, one pattern stood over everything else. Every negative word they added to a headline pushed the clicks up, by a couple of % each. And the positive words did the reverse. A word like worst pulled people in, and a word like love actually cost them readers. And here's why that should stop you cold. Nobody at that company was thinking about the savannah. The system was never told about smoke detectors or lions. It just measured millions of human thumbs. And out of raw click data, it rediscovered the exact bias evolution installed in you. It found the alarm from the outside and took its measurements. Evolution built the alarm, and the feed reverse-engineered the schematic. And once something can be measured, it can be aimed. Which raises the real question of this file. What happens to a person whose alarm fires all day and never resolves? We got a preview decades before the feed existed. In the 1970s, a researcher named George Gerbner started studying people who watched unusually large amounts of television, back when TV was about the heaviest media diet a person could have. And the heavy viewers all shared one thing. The world inside their heads was meaner than the world outside their windows. When they were asked their odds of being the victim of a violent crime, they guessed high, sometimes wildly high. And Gerbner gave the pattern a name that stuck: Mean World Syndrome. The unsettling part is the dose. Gerbner was looking at 3 channels and an evening news slot, and the modern version is a pocket-sized alarm with unlimited ammunition. When researchers recently studied the heaviest news consumers, the ones who genuinely cannot look away, they found something that should stop you cold. In that group, around 60% said the news was leaving them feeling physically unwell. Run down. on edge, not sleeping. Among everyone else, the number was closer to 6%. Same world, wildly different bodies. And the only variable was the dose. The alarm was built to change your behavior for a few seconds. Feed it forever, and it starts rewriting your model of the world. All of which brings the file back to that conclusion from the top, the one that says something's wrong with you. The alarm in your head is not broken. It might be the least broken thing you own, because every ancestor in your line, without one exception, survived long enough to pass it on. That's a perfect record. Your brain isn't malfunctioning when it reaches for the bad headline at 1 in the morning. Your brain is undefeated. What changed is the world it's plugged into. For the first time in the alarm's entire existence, there's an environment with an unlimited supply of exactly what it's tuned for. Run by an industry that has measured that tuning down to the decimal. The mismatch was never inside you. It's between you and the thing in your hand. I'm not going to end this by telling you to delete your apps, because that's not what these files are for. But something does change once you know the mechanism, because the next time you feel the pull toward a third article about the same catastrophe, some part of you will recognize the sound. Burnt toast. An alarm doing its job in a kitchen that no longer exists. It's the same pull behind your true crime habit, by the way, and behind reading about a disaster in a city you couldn't place on a map. The alarm doesn't check jurisdiction. The question at the start was why a brain built to keep you alive would make you feel this bad on purpose. The obvious answer, the one that says you're broken, turned out to be backwards. Nothing in you stopped working. The world just stopped cooperating. The file closes on a question it can't answer for you. When you're scrolling at 1 in the morning, is that the weakest part of you giving in? Or the oldest part of you doing its job? Either answer says something about who you think is driving. The dossier covers the rest of what's running you without permission, free at the first link below. And there's a sibling file about the threats your mind builds on its own, no feed required. It's called Why You Can't Stop Thinking, and it's on your screen now.